Alrighty, here we go. It is a brand new Flyers Daily for the 27th of March, 2025. Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. We're a little cleaned up today. Going in, when you guys see this, I have to take what my daughters call an everything shower before I go in for treatment. Because when I go in for treatment, which I'll be doing this morning, as you guys are seeing this, bright and early at 7:30 a.m., is I have my treatment and get my infusion, and then they hook me up to this little fanny pack that's a pump, and I continue my infusion for 46 hours after that. Then they'll come on Saturday morning and unhook me from the pump. But during that period, I can't shower, so I can't shower for like 3 days. So the day before treatment, I take a little something we call at the Myrtetus household an everything shower. Shave the head real good, like a baby's butt, trimmed up the beard a little bit, scrub everything down, get nice and clean, because I'm not going to be able to jump in the shower for the next couple of days. And not that I'll be doing a whole heck of a lot. I'll be spending a lot of time in bed. I said this, I think, going into treatment 3 that I didn't want to go. And I don't want to go today. But I'm excited to go because I have 3 of these in this phase left. Today, again in 2 weeks on Thursday, and then again 2 weeks after that. So I've got a month more of this phase of treatment, which I think might be the most difficult phase. So in a way, I don't want to go today because I don't want to feel like crap the next couple of days, next week. But I'm looking forward to the final month here as we continue to get our head down and push and beat some ass and beat some cancer ass. So thanks for all the notes of support and everything as well. Flyers back at it tonight. They will be in Montreal to take on La Habitante. They'll actually be back home, at Wells Fargo Center to take on the Habs after 0-4-1 road trip. And Montreal comes into this game having lost 3 straight games, but still sitting in playoff position. Now they're in 5th place in the Atlantic Division, 70 games played. They've got 12 left, a dozen, 33, 28, and 9 on the season, 75 points. They're 4-2-4 in their last 10. They've lost 3 straight, and they're minus 23 in goal differential. Now, Montreal, I mentioned they lost their last game. They lost the last 3 straight. They lost 4-3 to the Islanders on the road back last Thursday in overtime. They lost to the Colorado Avalanche 5-4 in a shootout on Saturday. And then they lost to the St. Louis Blues 6-1 on Tuesday in St. Louis. And they're in Philadelphia tonight. They still have to go to Carolina and Florida after that. Now, who's been leading the way for Montreal? Well, Nick Suzuki's leading them in points. He's actually more than a point per game player, 73 points in 70 games, 22 goals, 51 assists. He's got 4 on the power play to go along with 21 power play assists. He's got a shorty on the year as well. And a good shooting percentage, over 15%. Real nice. Cole Caulfield, second in scoring, 62 points in 70 games, 33 of them are goals, 10 of which are on the man advantage. And he's also shooting over 15%. A really impressive young rookie defender, Lane Hudson. In 70 games, he's got 54 points. He's in the Calder race along with Matvei Michkov and Wolf and obviously Celebrini. The really impressive number when I look at Lane Hudson, and look, great numbers, 54 points, 5 goals, 49 assists in 70 games. But it's the fact that he's playing 22 minutes and 29 seconds a night. That's incredible. 22 power play, 22 of his 49 assists are on the power play. You see how much guys can eat on the power play. Flyers just haven't had a power play. Konechny's numbers, if they had even an average or slightly above average power play, would be so much higher. Michkov's numbers would be so much higher. If Couturier is on that number, everybody benefits on that power play from a point total if it actually is productive. Flyers are 0 for the month of March, for goodness sake. I'm not going to go down the road talking about the power play again, but it'll be the Flyers and the Montreal Canadiens coming up tonight. That kicks off a 3-game homestand for the Flyers. Now, that we just mentioned, they had the 5-game road trip where they went 0-4-1. And this 3-game homestand sees us tonight with Montreal, Saturday against Buffalo, and then on Monday against the Nashville Predators. So Montreal, 1 playoff team, Buffalo, last place team in the Atlantic, Nashville out of the playoff mix as well. So not quite the gauntlet of opponents that most of that road trip was, or that stretch of games for the Flyers where you're seeing Tampa twice, Washington, Dallas, Carolina, really kind of a murderer's row of the schedule. They don't have that here and really don't have much of that the remainder of this season. They'll play Montreal again in Montreal on Saturday, April 5th. Then they'll go to New York to take on the Rangers, who currently are not sitting in a playoff spot. The Islanders at home, not sitting in a playoff spot. Ottawa is in wild card number 1. Then it's Columbus and Buffalo to wrap up the season. So the remainder of the schedule, not that difficult. They threw the most difficult part. But it's going to be difficult for this Flyers team, which we talked about yesterday and how they got here. And we brought back to March 6th, 2024. And why that was such an important date was the day that they traded, while in playoff position, Sean Walker. And that has led us to where we are now. Now, I was very impassioned in yesterday's episode about being where they are right now. I don't like where they are right now. I understand why they are where they are right now, but it doesn't mean I like it. I don't like being in this spot. And like John Tortorella said, I have no interest in coaching these games in this situation. What he's saying there, and people, I think some people took it the wrong way. And then he took it on himself. He says, I got to be better. I got to get my team better prepared. What he's saying there is, I don't want to be in this situation where we're playing out the string. We are, so I got to do a better job. And when a coach does that, what he's doing is he's taking all of the onus and blame off of the players. Now, John Tortorella doesn't play a shift, but he's taking all the blame on himself. Players in pro sports, I will tell you, having been in the media and in this for 30 years, 30 plus years, players in pro sports in locker rooms, when a coach does that, they love it. That is a coach having the rooms back. And they like having the pressure or the bullseye or all the criticism taken off them in some way. It is something that goes over very well in locker rooms. It just does. Otherwise, you wouldn't see coaches do it. And that's what Torts is doing. He's taking it off his players. And to some degree, it's not his players' fault that they're getting boat raced right now. They're a victim of the circumstance. They're a victim of being here at the time when the team is rebuilding, and they're in the stage of rebuilding where they're just taking things away and not adding them. And you don't have a complete NHL team, and you can't compete with Toronto, or you can't compete with Winnipeg, and you can't compete with Carolina right now with a roster that has lost 7 NHL players from the start of this season till now without replacing them with equal or better upgrades. So that's being kind of a victim of the circumstance. Now, I got a message on our feed on YouTube that Eugenia said rebuild starts after this year, and then you have to wait another 5 years. We don't have the right people in the front office. They're backfilling with average players. That's not helping. They're not backfilling. They haven't done crap in the acquisition business yet. It's been all taking away this year. They haven't backfilled with any average players this season, other than maybe Jacob Peltier, you could say. Okay. In the Frost Farabee deal. Okay, maybe a little bit there. But otherwise, no, they're not backfilling. They backfilled very little in this rebuild part where they tear it down, which is why they are where they are. And you can't, to me, you can have differing opinions on how the Flyers have taken on this part of the rebuild equation, the evaluation, the reduction of the players that were here. Really, the judgmental part of this, to me, comes in when you start adding. Because I look at the first part of it and figure out who's going to be here, who's not, and getting rid of players. I don't think that's a particularly difficult thing to do. I don't think you need to be a hockey Mensa to go through that part. That's nothing against Danny Briere or Keith Jones or any team that does it. I think figuring out who belongs with the team going forward and getting rid of the pieces that don't fit what your plan is going forward, I don't think that part's insanely difficult. I think the real hockey IQ and general managership happens now when you start adding players into the mix and you start bringing players in, whether it's trade, free agency, restricted free agency offer sheets, drafting, developing. That's when I think the hard work, the playing chess at a higher level comes into play. I don't think this part has been very difficult. He said, we don't have the right people in the front office. Well, I don't think we can make that judgment yet. A lot of guys aren't the right people. They don't have any experience until they have some experience. We got to hold them accountable on the experience that they have, and what they have done. So right now, this has been just the first part of the rebuild. And I know some people wanted them to tear it down more. They wanted Flyers to trade Couturier and trade Konechny. Although I got an email from a guy the other day that went on this rant about Travis Konechny, about how the Flyers should have traded him and they would have got a haul. And I said, well, just define for me, what is a haul for a player that was on an expiring deal and do a new raise, a large raise, and no guarantee that he was going to sign an extension with your club? You're not getting a haul for a player on an expiring deal that's going to be due for a big raise like Konechny was. There's this notion that you can trade anything you have that has some value and you're going to get a haul in return. You don't see that. A lot of times we see trades, they break and we go, that's all they got for him? Well, that's because player X is on an expiring deal. Yeah, but he scored 80 points last year. Yeah, but he's on an expiring deal. So teams don't give up the haul on a player that's expiring. And you can say they should have traded Konechny and they could have got a first-round pick, and maybe they could have. But that first-round pick is a crapshoot. It's a lottery ticket. So that notion that the front office isn't right, I don't know if it is. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying I'm not making a judgment until I see what they do and how they build. And that's going to take a little bit of time. And I know people are out of patience. I get it. I understand it. Another message came through, and it was Will William. He said, love the Flyers. I just think when you strip it down like they are, it makes it harder to evaluate pieces that you do have. He said, as an example, Drysdale. You have to wonder how he would be performing on a team that has more talent. In my mind, this pertains to a lot of players they have at the moment. And Will William is totally correct. It is hard to judge players and situations sometimes when you have a team that is bereft of depth and talent. It's harder to judge the goaltending when the structure in front of them is not great. We look at the raw numbers. We see 6 goals, 7 goals given up, and they look horrible. And they're not good. But you also have to consider the environment that the goaltender is playing behind. For offensive players, you have to consider the lack of depth and how easy it is to shut down 1 or 2 lines as opposed to a team that's got 3 lines that can score and a good checking line as a 4th line because of matchups. It does have an effect when a team's not good, but you have to project. You have to project what that goalie, that defenseman, that winger, or that center would be on a team that does have depth, that is built the right way, and that is a good team, and where they fit in that equation. But it is hard. I agree with when it is hard to make strict determinations about what a player is when they're on a team in a bad situation, and a team that's not good, and a team that is not winning. It's difficult to do that. How much of it is their performance based on what the team is as opposed to what they are or could be? It's very interesting stuff. So I appreciate that comment as well. A lot of great comments on the YouTube, Twitter feed. I read every one of them. And I will just say this before we get to a couple of emails. You know, I appreciate you guys and everybody that listens or watches this podcast that we do 5 days a week, and all the emails that people send me and all the messages on the YouTube comment section, tweets that I get, DMs. I use them because, A, I want to give you guys, the audience, a voice on this podcast, a little investment into it. You guys invested in this. I think you should have a piece of it and have a say, number one. Number two, you know, as I'm getting ready to do the podcast on any given day, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to talk about? I do this by myself. I'm sitting here in my basement home studio by myself. There's nobody else in here. My family's upstairs. I'm just chilling in here. And I got to go, okay, I'm on camera and I'm going to talk for however long the episode is, 20, 30, 40 minutes. What am I going to talk about? And seeing your notes and emails and DMs and tweets gives me angles of discussion that are timely and relevant. So keep them coming. I appreciate it a ton because it adds an element and variable to this show that I can't bring without you guys sending that stuff to me. I can't read your minds. And I get so many emails from listeners or viewers and so many messages and comments. It's great. It helps me put this together. So let's get to an email. Bill emails in. He said, I'm not asking you to disparage any of your fellow hosts, Just putting out there that I just listened to, I won't even say the podcast, a different Flyers podcast with so-and-so and his team. And they pretty much roasted York's benching as being totally wrong. He said, I did not get from your rant that it was wrong, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. What are they seeing that we are not? Appreciate your thoughts. I don't know. I haven't talked to the people on that podcast that you mentioned in your email, and I didn't hear what their reasoning was. But some of the reasoning, the people I thought were matters because they want to see a player like Cam York develop further and get more playing time. And every player makes mistakes. Therefore, I see other players make mistakes and they don't get benched. And there's only certain guys that do get benched. Well, I mean, we've seen Travis Konechny benched. We've seen Sean Couturier benched. We've seen every defenseman, but we've seen Travis Sanheim benched and scratched in his hometown. We have seen Mishkov benched. We have seen York benched prior. We saw Farabee, Frost. We've seen just about everybody benched. So no one is immune to it. And again, it wasn't a play for York, to me, that was just a bad decision in a hockey game mistake. It was a competitive mistake. It was not going back hard on a puck after a one defensive zone faceoff and having it end up in the back of your net to get the game tied when you got off to a decent start. It's a self-inflicted wound that happened out of a lack of compete, not out of a bad decision you made on the ice. Hockey's full of mistakes. So that, to me, when you have that, the lack of compete, that's where you violate the line of negotiable and non-negotiable. You can make mistakes, and if you repeat the mistakes, eventually I might bench you. If you keep making the same backhand pass in the defensive zone, blind backhand pass up the middle, and we keep paying for it, I may not bench you the first time, but when I talk to you about it and repeat, and you do it repeatedly, eventually I'm going to bench you for that. That's a decision on the ice, and you made a mistake, but you keep repeating the mistake, it's going to earn the benching. But when it comes to a mistake of not competing, that crosses the line immediately of you've gone into the non-negotiable area. It has to be addressed. That's my feeling on it. So thanks for the email, Bill. Appreciate it. Jared emails in and says, Jason, thanks for the shout out on last week's episode. I read the article on NHL.com and wanted to say that while I'm sure you don't love the attention, I appreciate you using your platform for the greater good. Cancer is something that touches everyone, and it's important to spread the word about preventative care. So a stick tap on the pads to you, F cancer. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't want the attention for any of these reasons. Never did, never will. But we're going to use this diagnosis and give it a purpose. And the fact that I'm going through this, we're going to give it a purpose. So maybe some other people don't have to go through this, or people that are going through what I'm going through, that we don't fight alone. And that this is something that strength in numbers is important. So thank you for that, Jared. He also says, I have to laugh at the continuing conundrum that I hear from Flyers fans on the pod about tanking. Some think the Flyers aren't tanking enough. Others seem fine with it. Most of us are ready to turn the page. And when I look around the league at the Buffalo dumpster fire, Anaheim struggles, Chicago's discord, Toronto, Edmonton still looking for their first cups of this era, I can't help but wonder if the league is turning on tanking. That's interesting. He said, I think it's falling out of favor, and teams like Washington that have rebuilt on the fly present an enticing alternative to markets that don't want to sink their results for a half a decade to return a handful of impactful players via the draft. He said, my theory, Briere figured out in 21-22 that you only need to tank about 1/4 or 1/3 of the season to get the desired result, a shot at a top 5 pick. Here's 21-22 when the Flyers fell apart and they finally turned the page to the post-Giroux era. And the following year, they did next to nothing at the trade deadline, and Fletcher was let go. Year 4, Giroux trade, top 5 pick. They got Gauthier, which now has turned into Jamie Drysdale. Year 5, do nothing, trade deadline. They got a 2023 top 7 pick. They got Mishkov, who looks like he's going to be a franchise player. He said in the Briere area, you can see a strong start in the first half of each season, but in the second half of the year, they start subtracting players without adding substantial backfills, which we talked about earlier, and the results tumble. This year has been an all-out free fall. Totally agree. Last year was too. The only difference between this year and last is the strength of their success in the first half. Good point. Last year's team overachieved to a degree that mitigated the free fall from landing them in the top 5 to 10 spot. Then you have the last year, the Sean Walker trade on March 6th, the last game of Carter Hart on January 20th against Colorado. And then in the draft, you trade back, you get Lachenko at 13, who looks like he might be a player. Now, this year, Frost, Farabee, Lawton trades, top 4 projected draft pick coming. So he said, he goes on to say, and this guy just lays out his emails unbelievably well. The Blackhawks have gotten above that 0.38 monthly win percentage once this season. What does that mean? Chicago has won 4 games or less every month this season, except one when they won 5. That is a lot of sustained losing for a long time, and that is hard to wash off, and I totally agree. What are some of the other ways a team can hedge your tank? Sure, you can go hard for 60 games and tank the final 20. We've seen that, but if you play great in one phase of the game but tank over the other 2, or the reverse, you have a strong PK and 5-5, but the league's worst power play, and they look at where the Flyers ranked in the power play. So he said the final hedge your tank strategy is the only one I vehemently disagree with. Tanking 1 to 2 positions at a time. I can't help but think the Flyers knew they were taking a massive gamble when they entered this season with 2 rookie backup goalies, supporting a first-year starter with less than 100 starts in Sam Ersson. The goaltending has been an objectively terrible, and the backup goalie depth chart of Fedotov, Kolosov, Pettersson, and Sandstrom is sub-NHL quality since Hart left. And yet Briere has made 0 attempt to bring in a qualified replacement. That may not be intentional, but it's another way to hedge your tank. I have often said, again, Jared, keep emailing. Phenomenal. But I'm going to encourage you to go further. Start writing for some website, because the stuff you write is unbelievably, and it's backed up with numbers, facts, and everything. The best way to prevent winning in hockey is to have substandard goaltending. It is. It's just the way to do it. Everything falls apart when you don't have goaltending. Great email from Jared. Mark says, hey, Jason, this is Mark. I just wanted to say I appreciate you reading my email at your podcast show on Flyers Daily. Great job, as always, on your show. As for the Flyers this rest of this season, quite honestly, I really don't want the Flyers to win any more games. I don't even want them to get a point. Let the Flyers tank and let this team stink at this point. It's okay. I do want a top 5 or lower generational draft pick. I do think it was the right move to trade Frost, Beezer, Lotz, and during the offseason coming up, or free agency day on July 1st, I think the Flyers should move on from Risto to get more salary cap space. This season, I've been impressed with Mishkov. He's played very well, and that he deserves the Calder Cup award. We're still in a rebuild, and I'm still able and willing to be patient. Put my faith and trust in Briere, Jonesy, and Dan Hilferty, and the powers of the front office. I'm looking forward to watching the NHL draft in late June. First of all, I do want to go back to the line you said a little earlier, Mark, in your email. I said, I do want the top 5 or lower generational draft pick. There's no generational player in this draft pick. We got to stop throwing the generational word around like it's just another word. In my lifetime, I will be 53 years of age on Sunday. The generational players that I personally watched in my lifetime, I won't go back to Bobby Orr because I was still a little too young. But obviously, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux were generational players. Eric Lindros was a generational player. Connor McDavid is a generational player. I will see if Connor Bedard is the generational player. He came in with that pedigree for sure, but hasn't jumped to it just yet. He could. I don't have Austin Matthews as a generational player. When you look at the numbers of Connor McDavid next to Austin Matthews, one is generational, one is a superstar in Austin Matthews, but he's not generational. Alexander Ovechkin, generational. Sidney Crosby, generational. Austin Matthews, not there yet. And we'd like to throw, hey, this guy's great, he'll be great. Not generational. Now, is next year generational with McKenna? I don't know. We'll see what he does in his draft -1 season next year. Draft -2 last year. So we'll see. He equaled numbers at the same age that Mario Lemieux did this past season. So maybe he'll become a potentially generational talent. This draft, there is not a generational talent, I don't believe. I'm not a draft expert, but I don't follow it. People tweet me and email and message me. Who do you think the Flyers should take in the top 5 in this draft? I don't answer. I don't know. I am not a draft guy. I'm not going to pretend I'm a draft guy. I didn't have the time, especially this year, to follow the seasons of the prospective draft picks. So I'm not going to fake like I know what I'm talking about. Just read somebody else's work and regurgitate it. I don't know. But we'll see what they end up with. As far as the team, what Mark said, I don't want them to get another point this season. They will at some point, but it's going to be a rough finish to the end. It is going to be a rough finish. And how Buffalo finishes or Nashville or some of these other teams, look, the Flyers could end up with pretty good odds to end up with the number 1 overall pick. They really could. That's not off the table. We didn't see any movement last year in the finishing order based on record and what ended up happening with the draft lottery. It held true to form last year. We'll see if that happens 2 years in a row. It's very rare that it does hold true to form completely. But good email, Mark. Thank you as well. You can always send an email in at jason.myrtetus, MYRTETUS @gmail.com. And we will get to some of them on the podcast. So like you guys helped today, like 26 minutes in, and a lot of it was based on listener commentary, which is awesome. Smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the bell for notifications. If you're watching or listening on a podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever, make sure you subscribe. Leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. I imagine tomorrow it'll be a game breakdown from the Flyers-Montreal game tonight with Brian Smith. I'm having treatment today. Probably not going to feel great tonight. So it'll probably be Smitty tomorrow. We'll see if I'm good to go on Sunday for Mondays with Meltzer with Bill. And we'll have to play that one by ear over the next couple of days, and we'll see how the recovery is from this treatment. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Appreciate all of you. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time on a brand new Flyers Daily.